Good afternoon, Rhode Nation. We're back for another week of Mark's Remarks on WRIU 90.3 FM Kingston. And so I'm back with a new guest. Obviously wanted to find a new sport. I reached out to one of my former guests to try and get some teammates of his. I reached out to my buddy Mason on the men's track and field team to try and find some new guests to cover all the facets of that team. And so today, I am joined in the studio by a senior captain and a thrower, Chris Tavarone. Chris, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a while because it's, like I said, track and field is a very interesting sport. There's so much that goes on because there's so many different events, and they're all so different.
Yeah.
Everyone's competing for that same glory, but the events and the different types of people that you encounter on a track and field program can be so vastly different.
Yep.
And I mean, like I remember last year when I was talking to Mason and learning about all the ins and outs of pole vaulting, I was astounded. And that's only scratching the surface of track and field. So to kind of touch upon a little bit about your background, you are a thrower, focusing on shot put and discus, which are, for the casual sports fan, people aren't very familiar with it, maybe outside of the Olympics. So, I mean, just how did you get involved in these sports?
It kind of complicated because I played pretty much every sport growing up: football, basketball, baseball, some soccer. But then getting into high school, I knew I didn't want to play basketball because I really didn't love it. Right? I didn't love basketball. I wasn't really good at it either. But I was tall, and I probably would have made the team if I tried out. But I didn't want to take someone's spot who wanted to be there, right? Who's been working towards that, like their whole life pretty much. So I was like, you know what? I'll find something else to do. Wrestling didn't really pique my interest, and I was talking to my dad one day in the car leaving football practice in the fall because I started thinking about what I wanted to do in the winter. And he told me, he was like, hey, I threw shot put in high school, and Grandpa did too, actually. And so we started talking about that, and because I had no idea what shot put was up until that point. And after hearing about it, I was like, all right, it sounds cool. You get to lift. You don't really run a lot. You get to eat a lot.
Sounds like every high schooler's dream.
Yeah, especially for like every big kid's dream too. It's great. You just show up, throw, get in the weight room, lift a lot of weight, and then as soon as you get out, you eat, and then you do whatever you want for the rest of the day. So right after that, I was like, you know what, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I did. I went through the whole indoor season. I threw shot put. I had, an okay freshman season, but it wasn't enough to pull me out of baseball, which I've been playing my whole life. So I have three brothers, two older and one younger, and we played baseball and football like our whole lives. So I still played baseball spring of my freshman year in high school. Just because I loved baseball, and I still do. But sophomore year, after indoor track, I had a good enough year where all my teammates and coaches were saying, like, hey, you should probably give up baseball and come out and do this in the spring. Like, you could possibly get a scholarship. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I love baseball. It's still, like, it's my favorite sport. But after, some long conversations with my dad and teammates and everything I did, I gave up baseball and picked up spring track. It's actually funny because I had signed up for winter baseball workouts, and even after I made my decision to not play baseball in the spring and to join the spring track team, I still showed up to all the winter baseball workouts and took batting practice, took fielding practice, and all these kids knew I wasn't going to be on the team. But it was just like, it was cool being with my friends I've been playing with my whole life, just working out with them, playing baseball still. But then from there, spring track went well sophomore year. And from there on, it's just, I'm here now. Like, it just kind of worked out.
Clearly you made the right decision. I'm curious, what was just the transition like actually getting into the sport? I mean, obviously you said you've played a number of different sports growing up, football, baseball, all of these things. But shot put and discus, it's a very particular motion, and it's just you need to have a very particular physicality in order to do it. So, I mean, just obviously I can imagine your dad was a big help having been experienced with it, but just what was that transition like actually learning how to do it?
It was tough because it's something that like I've really never done I've never done a movement like that ever in my life. Now swinging a baseball bat is kind of similar with the hip motion. You turn your knee and your hip forward, and then your upper body comes around. It's kind of similar to that, like with that, but it was a lot of YouTube videos, like sitting in my room late at night watching YouTube videos, studying people throwing shot put, and a lot of practice and a lot of frustration too at first, and still today there's still some frustration because it's a very individual and mental sport, because it's like the only thing your coach can do is just kind of tell you what to do. That he can't put your body in the right position and help you do it. It's like it's all on you. So it was a tough transition, especially because it's a lesser known sport, right? A lot of people know about baseball, a lot of people know about basketball, so they can kind of give you tips and tricks. Sorry, but it was like either my shot put coach at high school or YouTube videos to try and learn how to throw. So it was tough.
And so then once you sort of got over that hump, I mean, I can tell from this you're a 3-time all-county in indoor and outdoor. Once you officially made that transition, was like, all right, this is going to be my sport. Just when did your sort of competitive nature take over and you were like, all right, you know what, this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to be really good at it?
That was probably the end of my indoor sophomore year, right, where I had that kind of epiphany saying, like, maybe I should do this outdoors. I can't remember if I think I placed 5th in the county that year or something, but I came from nowhere pretty much. Like it was a good year. But then after that, I was like, yeah, I could be like pretty decent at this, and it's fun. A lot of great teammates. Like we all enjoyed it. Like the meets were a blast. But I think outdoor sophomore year, I did well in discus. That was what I was really looking forward to because you couldn't throw discus indoors, only shot put. So we were throwing discus outdoors, and my first meet wasn't great, second meet wasn't great, and I was ready to give up on that. And my coach was like, just stick it out. But then it started jumping. My PR started jumping 5, 10, 15 feet. And then when I saw I could improve vastly throughout a season, yeah, like I did everything I was doing was trying to put in the time and effort into improving my throw. And I think, yeah, like spring of my sophomore year was really like, wow, this could be something that like I could be pretty good at.
And so then as you start to excel, like you touched upon earlier where your friends and coaches were saying, hey, like you could really get a scholarship, like this could be a serious future for you. As you started to kind of get through your junior year and so on, when did colleges really start to like kind of reach out and start looking at you?
It was mainly after, I think indoor my junior year, I started to get a couple of letters. Actually, URI was the first school to reach out to me. I remember walking out of practice in my high school science wing because we don't have an indoor track and not many high schools do. So we would practice in like in the hallways and stuff. And I remember my coach, we were all warming up and he comes out and he tosses a letter to me. He's like, here you go. Congrats. It's your first one. And I was like, first one of what? And I hold it up and it says the University of Rhode Island. I was like, oh wow, like this is real. Like this is crazy. Because everyone told me, right, you could get a scholarship, you could get, you could throw in college, but I was like, all right, we'll see. And then that day it was like, yeah, that's crazy. So I think winter my junior year, school started to reach out to me. But I also got recruited for football too. And so right around the same time for the track letter, I started to go on visits for football too. So I kind of like pursued both sports equally at that point up until fall senior year.
What were some of the schools that you were looking at for football?
Lehigh was one of them. Fordham was another one. I think I went to Towson for a couple workouts. I worked out at Rutgers for one day. Yeah, like Rutgers would have been great, but they didn't really have any interest in me really because I was a very different player than the guys they're used to. My high school ran a very, very old and ancient offense, and I was specialized in things that were sought after in probably like the 70s and 80s, not so much today. But yeah, so like Division I AA schools, and so that kind of like that's what made me think about whether I should do track or football because wherever you go to play football, the commitment is equally as high, right? And the demand on your body is equally as high, but your opportunity to really like move on, right, to that next level, to the NFL, does really like matter where you go. And none of those schools I felt like were a great place for me to shine and possibly go to the NFL, right? Because everyone has a dream, but not many people get to make it. So it was a bit of a reality check. I was like, you know what, if schools at a similar or even a little bit higher level were looking at me for track, it's a lot safer on my body. And I'm an engineering major too, so it's a lot safer on my brain too, which is going to be my money maker for the rest of my life, right? If I have brain injuries, more than I've probably already suffered, I'm sure playing 12 years of football, has done enough, but figured it's just safer in general just to go on the track route, and I loved it too. It was fun. Had a lot of fun in high school and more fun here too.
Yeah, that was kind of going to be my next question, was like, was there ever the idea of maybe wanting to do football and track? Because obviously the seasons obviously don't really conflict, and there are obviously some athletes that make that decision where they're like, all right, I can kind of balance it, like do something in the spring and do something in the fall at the D1 level. But was that ever something you had thought of?
For a little bit. I definitely thought about it for a little bit, and then when I realized I wanted to be an engineer, it was like time is a premium, especially for engineering, just in general, right? And then you add in athletics on top of that, just one sport, and it's like you really don't have a ton of time, and then you're playing 2 Division I sports in 1 year, and that really, like, it would have been really tough, and it's hard because you really can't be totally invested in one sport. Right, you kind of be splitting yourself in the fall. It's football season. Then you can start thinking about track. Whereas, like, at this level, you really need to be bought into one sport because that's how you're going to get every bit of potential out that you have. So,
yeah. And so then once you had kind of just decided to go down the track route, you had obviously gotten the offer from URI, and then as more offers started to come in, what more or less went into your decision to ultimately commit to URI?
I think it was a combination of the engineering program, because some of the schools that we're looking at didn't have engineering, or it wasn't great. Like their facilities were a little bit run down, or their program just didn't rank very high. And also on my visit here, I felt it was like it was pretty much what I was used to back home. So it felt like an extension of home when I got here. Like I was very comfortable, and everyone was very supportive and like engaging. They were coming up to me, asking questions, like getting to know me. They seemed genuinely interested, not just trying to sell their school, which at different schools, I've heard people tell me, oh, you don't want to go there, dude. Like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's not fun. Like the guys are a little bit weird. And it's like as soon as someone's talking down on another school or just really trying to push, like trying to sell their school, like I said, rather than just kind of get to know you and build that relationship, it kind of turns you off. And then just after getting here, seeing everyone in practice, like really getting along very well and just loving what they're doing, it just kind of was like a no-brainer for me.
And it was fascinating that you brought up that URI was your first offer, because I've spoken to so many athletes over the past couple of years, and a lot of them have similar stories where they were like, URI was one of the first schools that offered me, and then after the whole process, they decided that, all right, the first offer is the best one. That's usually, it goes against the cliche where it's like you never want to take your first offer. I mean, URI was the first school that I got accepted to when I was coming to college anyway, and then I ended up here. But when you had accepted the offer, you had committed, and you look back at like your freshman self during high school, were you at all just like surprised at how far you had come from that, like, more or less kind of confused freshman trying to figure out what sport he wanted to play?
Definitely. Yeah, like if you were to told me that I would be hanging up the phone right after I had a conversation and just accepted a Division I scholarship for track and field, if you told me that in the fall of 2016, I think it was, my freshman year, I'd be like, what's track and field? Like, that's the craziest thing to me, is like I didn't even know what it was at that point. And then here I am now, I'm on scholarship, but more importantly, just having a great time with a lot of great guys and going out and competing. So it's kind of crazy looking back now, especially at where I like even just from now to freshman year of college too, it's been very different. Because COVID threw a wrench in things. But yeah, a lot of growth and a lot of really good memories.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good segue into what I wanted to touch upon next, was that your freshman year was during the height of COVID, and playing as an indoor and outdoor athlete, COVID really impacted you probably more than most other athletes. Because, I mean, outside of like basketball and swimming and some of the other sports that are indoors, I mean, indoor track, like that's one of those things where it's like it's very difficult to it was difficult to do that during the pandemic. And so, I mean, coming in as a freshman, you in indoor, you ended up winning at one of the meets against Northeastern. But again, everything is different. It's not anything like what you had experienced before, especially considering college athletics is a whole different universe than in high school. But I mean, just kind of walk me through a little bit of what that first year was like for you.
Okay, yeah, it was. It's funny. I was just talking to a couple of my teammates about this earlier in the week. Just like reminiscing on it a little bit, right? It's kind of like, it's cool to think about, right? We all went through that and just got better and fought through the adversity, right? But thinking back, it was a tough time. I mean, we couldn't use our locker room, so we had to keep all of our implements and practice gear in our dorms and like hoof it out to the shot put circle. And we all had to wear masks outdoors while we were throwing. We had our pods, so we can only practice in groups of 4. So we really couldn't like mesh as a team very well. While lifting, we had like 10 guys in the weight room, and I don't know if you've seen the weight room, but we pretty comfortably fit 50 guys in there, if not a little bit more, when we lift now, and there was only 10 in there at that time. So it felt like a ghost town, you know. You really felt like disconnected. There wasn't really a huge like family or team feeling, which I felt so much when I came on my visit that past year. And it was kind of tough because like you leave home. I mean, 3 hours. I'm from New Jersey, so it's only a 3-hour ride, but still you're not home. You're at this big place with a bunch of people you don't know. And you really can't get to know them because you can't hang out with them. You can't share a locker room together. You can't really like lift together as a whole team. You can't eat in the dining halls together as a whole team. So it was very, very individual, and it was tough. But it was also we kind of came together and fought through that as your little pod, right? So I had 3 other throwers that I was with. So we got really close, but just as a whole team aspect, it was tough. We really didn't feel like a super close team until conference, because then we could travel. We actually did, because that was in the spring of 2020. Or no, was that 21? Yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
So things started to loosen up a little bit there. So we got to travel. We got to stay in the hotels. We got to go on the buses. So then you finally got that little bit of like that family feeling, the big team, and that was awesome. It almost made you more appreciative, because you had that in high school, right? You understood what that was, what that feeling was in high school, and then all fall you're kind of like, oh, is this how it is? You know, like, is this how college athletics is? And you knew COVID had something to do with it, but you didn't know. You had no idea as a freshman. So that was a bit of a crazy year. But yeah, finished strong because things loosened up and got to travel and got closer as a team, and the weight room started to open up a little bit more. But we were still affected pretty heavily. But there were some better aspects towards the end.
And so, I mean, how much of a toll did the isolation, in a sense, take on you mentally? Because obviously you're playing a very individual sport, so when you're actually competing, you're by yourself. But then once you get out of that, usually you'd be able to be with your friends and so on. And then, like you alluded to, like, it's every facet of your life you were by yourself for a very long time. I mean, that had to have been incredibly mentally challenging, especially as a freshman.
Yeah, it was tough. Because typically you can kind of let off some steam with your friends, joking around, like eating dinner or at someone's dorm or house after. But in this case, you had to file into Butterfield, get your little tray, get the food, close it up, walk back to your dorm, and kind of sit there and and eat. Now I had my roommate who was very, very good friends from home. I think we met in Cub Scouts, so we were like 6 years old, and then we were like best friends all throughout high school and lived with each other freshman year. So that definitely helped, right? Being with someone who's so comfortable or you're so comfortable with. But yeah, the individual aspect of track is broken up by having your teammates around you a lot, and like especially like you said afterwards, and when that's not there, it's very, very tough because you're thinking like, oh wow, that was a bad practice, that was a bad meet, and there's no one really there to say like, oh, don't worry about it, dude, like you got it, or you know what you're doing wrong, you can work on this, work on that. It's just you, right? So you got to really try and do that yourself, and that doesn't work 100% of the time.
And so how do you think that mental fortitude that you obviously had to really instill upon yourself to get through your freshman year and be successful, how do you feel that has set you up to be successful further on in college, now being a senior?
Yeah, it definitely comes in handy when, say, I'm studying for a big exam now, right? I'm typically, some classes you can study with a group, some I study alone. So it's in that way, yeah, it definitely helps. I didn't even think about it until now, actually, just because like I was so used to doing that all freshman year, where I'm sure now that definitely helps me just kind of be able to help myself focus and calm myself down when I'm getting worried about, hey, I don't know this topic and my exam's in a day or two. It definitely, yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, it definitely helps a little bit. Still is not fun either way, but yeah, definitely helps.
And so then you just kind of mentioned it when you're studying for exams and trying to really pursue your academics. You'd made the decision to do the one sport so you're able to balance your time, and engineering is obviously a very intense major. It's not one that you really see with a lot of athletes because of just how academically intensive it is and so on. But as you've kind of gone through the years, I mean, obviously freshman year, you kind of put that as an outlier in a sense. But once it kind of got back to like regular academics and more like what you would have imagined college would have been, how has it been like balancing the two?
Definitely tough, right? Because it's just a ton of work, and it's a ton of work in class, right? So I'm taking, I don't know, however many credits I'm taking, right? And I think it's like 17 this semester. And that's a ton of hours in class, right, or in labs. And then you have practice on top of that. But then you got to factor in, like, hours of studying, hours of homework, hours of corresponding between teachers and TAs and classmates. It definitely gets tough to balance track and school. And then if you want to have a social life, that also comes into account there too, which that does suffer as an engineering student athlete, I guess. But one thing I will say is that I do have a lot of teammates, especially throwers who are engineers. Last year, I think we had like six out of like I think we had 12 throwers. I think 6 or 7 of us were engineers. So it was definitely something like you saw them there practicing every day in the weight room every day. So like, all right, they could do it. I could do it too. So it's almost like a bit of support without even anyone saying anything, right? You just know that they're going through the same thing you're doing. It just helps you get through that. But yeah, the balance is tough, and it changes every year, right? Every year you think you have it, right? Oh, okay, I'll do my homework this night, I'll go out this night, or hang out with my friends this night. Every year it changes, because last year I had a little bit of a lighter workload. This year I have a lot more. So it's kind of like a variable thing you have to figure out year to year, even semester to semester too. Yeah, but it's tough.
Do you have a particular specialization for engineering, or is it general?
So I'm a civil engineer, which is in civil engineering. There's environmental, which is more like wastewater treatment or drinking water treatment, chemical spills like oil spills, stuff like that, and how to remediate all that stuff. There's geotechnical, which is like soil sciences and like foundations of buildings, pretty much examining the soil you're building on top of. That's probably my favorite group now. In high school, I wanted to be an architect when I grew up, right? Everyone says, oh, what do you want to do? I'm like, all right, I want to be an architect. But URI, I don't know, they might have one. It wasn't really like pushed upon me, I guess. They didn't say, oh, you can check it out. So everyone was saying go engineering because you're better off in the future. You can do a lot more. So I went civil engineering because there's a structural aspect too where you can design buildings. It's like, okay, that's pretty close to architecture. But now as I've kind of gotten into the more in-depth classes, I found out that I like the soil sciences and geology more than like building design. So that's changed. But I'd say geotechnical is my expertise, I guess.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, again, like hearing the different stuff that athletes really dedicate a lot of their time to, and you hear a wide variety of things, but then once you get into the really technical stuff, it's like, all right, I gotta commend you for being able to still be super competitive while doing something like that. And so I'm not very familiar with the entire curriculum of engineering, but I mean, I imagine that you have to take like physics and other classes of that nature.
Yep.
I'm curious, have you ever taken any principles that you've learned from those classes and implemented them into your athletics?
For physics, actually, yes. Yeah. Definitely, like, yeah. So I think it's orbital velocity. It's very applicable to like discus and hammer throw, because as you're moving that implement, you actually are doing it. You're orbiting that implement around your body. And there's one aspect in the finish of your throw, if you kind of like pull down to your left and pull against that, like the discus, you're pulling velocity off of it. But if you let that discus go off in a straight line from that orbit, I'm probably not doing a great job of describing it. And you actually increase the velocity of your release as opposed to pulling down off of it. Mm-hmm. And that's something I did learn about in physics. So it's like I've been practicing that my whole life, right? I've been learning that in athletics from like the technique standpoint, but then you learn why that's true in physics. So it kind of did like help me understand that a little bit more. Yeah,
that's fascinating. I mean, yeah, that seems like it. Like you said, you've been doing it your whole life. You understand just how to do it from a body perspective. Like it all becomes muscle memory at the end of the day. But then once you kind of start to learn about more of the numbers behind it and the reasons stuff happens, I got to imagine that mentally, after you had that first lesson, the next time you're throwing, you're like, all right, maybe if I like tilt my body a little bit, like I could change the angle, maybe that'll change it.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because you don't really. That's another reason why I'm so fascinated by like your aspect of track and field, because it's so far removed in a sense from so many other sports where it's like you can really have many different things like apply to it. And I feel like that's also, I could be totally off base, but I feel like that it's very common for track athletes and stuff like that to be into these sort of majors and this sort of academia. And I feel like that subconsciously, when you're thinking about what you want to study, there's got to be a correlation or two. There has to be.
Yeah. So you definitely see that a lot with a lot of guys in the team who go kinesiology, which is like sports science. You see a ton of, and I'm sure it's like that through all of athletics, because right, you grow up playing sports and you kind of learn how to fix yourself, right? If you get a little bit banged up or you tweak this muscle, you learn how to treat it. And then you figure out you can take a major in college where that's what you learn about. You learn about body mechanics and how your body repairs itself. And so you do see a lot of athletes kind of go that way because they can apply it to their practice every day too. They know firsthand what to do when their hamstring is starting to cramp up a little bit, or they feel dehydrated, or their energy levels are low. And so, yeah, it is really cool seeing like people's majors, what they're learning in school, kind of also applied to what they're doing on the track. And I do see people gravitate towards like, I guess, applicable majors too, a lot more often than just like ones they would enjoy otherwise that don't relate to sports as much.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
So here, we've had enough science talk for right now. Let's get back to the main reason why everyone wants to listen to this show. 2021, coming out of COVID, seemed to be a pretty successful year for you. I feel like you'd agree on that. New England outdoor champion in discus. I mean, and obviously the NCAA preliminary qualifier, which we'll touch upon a little bit, because that's unbelievable. But I mean, New England outdoor champion for 2021, coming out of COVID, having gone through all the struggle and everything, really having to adjust by yourself to college athletics. What was that tournament like for you, and just how were you feeling going into that?
I was feeling pretty good because the week prior we had our conference championship, and I think it was a 3.5 meter PR, which is very big. Like PRs come by the centimeters and maybe like half a meter, you know. So a 3.5 meter PR was huge for me and a huge confidence boost. So I was kind of riding that into the New England championships, and definitely just felt much more comfortable than the rest of the season. And just and that wasn't a great meet for me either, New England's, but still managed to fight through and win. But yeah, it was cool because that was my first sense of like success at a huge meet, right? Our conference meet is huge in the sense of that's what we train for all year, right? But the A10 I think is 15 teams, but New England's there was I think like 30 something teams there, so it was a lot of kids. That was my first taste of that in college, and that was a really cool feeling.
And so then, I mean, immediately afterward, it like you're just a champion. Like you kind of just touched upon it there, where you're amongst so many people and you were able to excel at that point. I mean, kind of going back to the analogy I used before, like you're a freshman in high school really trying to figure this stuff out, and then the competitor takes over. You're able to get a college scholarship, and then within like 2 years, you're a New England champion and then competing to qualify for the NCAA tournament. Like, how was that sort of feeling when you kind of look back at it now?
It was awesome because we'd put so much time in as our whole team, all my teammates. We were in just in practice in the weight room, putting all the extra hours in together. It really was a team effort, honestly. Like, it wasn't track is an individual sport, but you are surrounded by other individual athletes, right? Like everyone's competing for their own title. Only one person can win, but you can be aided by so many people, and I really did. All my teammates really pushed me a lot and gave me a lot of motivation every day at practice in the weight room and at the meets too, right? Everyone's cheering for each other. It was. It was cool to win. But it was definitely awesome just to see me and the rest of my team succeed exponentially throughout the year.
And so before we kind of go into the NCAA qualifiers and stuff, walk me through just what a tournament like one of these big New England championships is like. I mean, I've had experience with the Atlantic 10s, and it's you can kind of get the gist of how it is.
Yeah.
But when it expands to so many schools, just how does that tournament sort of operate, at least from your perspective?
So it's as an athlete, you try not to make things bigger than they are. You treat every meet pretty much the same, although you're never really gonna totally do that, right? You're gonna treat meets differently, regardless of how hard you try not to. But that meet I looked at that meet as just like another like conference championship, pretty much, even though it was a lot more people. And yeah, it's just longer, so there's more flights. Every meet there's groups of 12 throwers, and they all throw at one time because there's too many guys to just have one line, right? If you have 40 throwers, you're not just going to have a line of 40 people. Like one guy throws, next guy gets in. It takes too long for everyone to get all three throws in. So they split them up into groups. They call them flights. So at big meets, there could be like 3, 4, or 5 flights of people. So you're waiting around a little bit longer than normal because at smaller meets, you typically get there, you warm up, you kind of mentally prepare, and then you start throwing within probably an hour or two. But at big meets, you get there, and you're sitting around a lot. You're watching different events go. Then you're watching the first 3 flights of your event go. So it kind of gives you more time to think and possibly more time to overthink, which is not what you want to do. So you have to be prepared to kind of take your mind out of that situation for 2 hours while while the other flights are going, and then you kind of click back into that just like normal meet mode and just do like get the job done pretty much. But it is hard, definitely tougher for like the regional meet, like you just mentioned before. I mean that is a huge meet. It's the eastern half of the United States, and like the top what is it? I think it was like 42 people in every event are at that meet. So you have people from Harvard, you have people from LSU, you have people from Michigan, you have people from Tennessee, FSU, Georgia, like all these huge schools, right? You see all these kids on Instagram and all over like social media, and all of a sudden then they're right in front of you, right? You're at the same meet, you're in line with them, they're standing next to you as you guys are warming up. So it's a little bit intimidating, but you have to be able to remind yourself like you're here, like you made it, you deserve to be here too. Like don't psych yourself out, and you try, right, to treat it as a normal meet. It is tough in that sense, but you really try to just treat it as a normal meet.
And so then, participating in the qualifiers, obviously you didn't end up moving forward in it.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of an experience wrapped into the rest of your college athletics experience, just where do you rank participating in that qualifier?
At least top 3, right? I don't want to be like too specific, right? Because we had a great year last year. I did win the indoor shot put title, which was great, right? But I think I honestly I'd have to say that's probably my favorite memory so far if I were to rank it. Just because like we flew down there with 6 guys who were all super dedicated and very focused. Got down there to, I think it was University of North Florida, so it was a different campus, different weather, and like I said before, like you see the LSU bus roll in, or the Clemson bus roll in, or Alabama, like, and you really kind of get the sense of like, wow, this is a real, like this is a really big meet, but you're there and you got to compete just like everyone else. But I think that was such an amazing trip just to be down there and experience that, like that level of competition with everyone else. Even though I didn't move on, and that's all right. It was another just experience or chance to learn and grow as an athlete, because next time that happens, right, I won't be as focused on the other teams there as my own performance, and that'll just kind of help you throw farther and hopefully move on.
And so then, kind of touching on the mental aspect of playing in these competitions. Obviously, when you look at the Atlantic 10 conference championships and a lot of these championships in general, you're all competing as a team, but it's all segmented into the individual events. Yeah. Whereas you may not win your event, but your school as a whole could still win the entire conference championship, which is what you've been a part of for the past 3 years. I mean, since you were a freshman, they've won 3 straight championships.
Yeah.
So how big of a confidence boost is it to you? Say you don't perform your best in a conference championship, but your university still wins and you're still a part of that championship team. Obviously, like, you're probably feeling a little bit down that you weren't as big of a boost for that run, but you were still a part of that chip anyway, and you're still a part of the reason why they won. How does that impact your confidence?
It's definitely huge, because you're just part of a team that success, like, kind of just grows on trees almost. Even it sounds bad, right? Like, but it almost seems like that, because you're constantly surrounded by people who are putting in extra hours in the weight room, at practice, in the training room, right? Healing, they're recovering just as hard as they're training. And so even if you're not winning, right, if you're not an A10 champion every year, it's still just so amazing being on a team full of A10 champions or regional qualifiers or national qualifiers, because it, like, we all work hard, and we all deserve well, I shouldn't say deserve, right? We all earn that chance to be in those spots and to be at those conference championships and to be surrounded by guys who just come in day out and work so hard towards that goal it helps you. Because on days where you're not feeling great, you're a little bit sick, or you're just tired, long day in the library the night before, you got a big exam and you're exhausted. It's like, all right, yeah, there's a team full of 49 other guys who are probably going through the same thing, and they're working hard and they're really busting it. So it's like it does kind of force you to not feel sorry for yourself in times where it's very easy to, and just kind of push you and move you in the right direction. So it's a great feeling. Like I was talking to one of my teammates, I think 2 weeks ago, such a different feeling than in high school, because teams in high school, a lot of guys sign up just to be with their friends, right, and have fun, which is fine. At that level, that's all right. But at this level, everyone wants to be here, right? It's not like someone's just showing up for fun. Everyone wants to be here, and it's such a different feeling walking into the track and knowing you're not going to have to be on top of guys for goofing off at practice or not listening to coach or not doing the things they should do. It's like everyone is here and very, very driven towards one goal, and that goal is to succeed as an individual and as a team too. And yeah, it's such a great feeling being on a team like that.
It's from that last sort of line that you kind of just got on, where it's like you don't have to be on a lot of guys and so on, that maturity level. It sounded a little bit like that the captain in you coming out a little bit there. And now we hadn't touched upon that yet. You got named as a team captain in 2022, and just obviously last year was a pretty successful year, had been a number of successful years coming forward. So to be named as one of the captains for such a perennial contender regionally and just such a historic and successful program, what was that feeling like?
It's an honor. It really is. Being a leader of a team of this caliber really is an honor. And it just being able to help develop guys every day to help develop guys and be a part of like this legacy here at URI is huge. And it's just something that I was working very hard for, because I've been a captain at my high school teams in the past, but outside of that, I come from a long family history of military service, and I understand the value of good leadership, and it really does make a difference in your team and your team's success if you have good leaders versus subpar or bad leaders. And so my goal was just to come in every day and make sure I did everything that I possibly could, that the guys were motivated and they felt confident and comfortable, because if everyone's confident and comfortable and motivated, nothing can really stand in your way. And yeah, it's a huge honor and a big responsibility too, because it's like you have that success of the past teams, and it's your job to make sure that continues too, along with coaches, right? It's their job too, but you're a little bit more hands-on than a coach because you're with the guys in practice, in weight room, in the locker room, and outside too. So there's a little bit of pressure to continue that run, but it's just such an awesome feeling being able to develop younger athletes and just be that like older leadership figure that you had and you were very appreciative in the past, and now I get to kind of repay that for them, and that's such an awesome feeling.
So you have that responsibility to be able to offer that mentorship and offer just some of that wisdom that you've had through your years, but you still need to get mentored by someone yourself. And so we were talking about him before the show, but I mean, your head coach, very animated guy during all of these events. He's someone who I've yet to meet, but I mean, just tell me about some of the experiences that you've had with your coach and just how he's molded you into the athlete that you are today.
Yeah, he's a great coach. He really understands what it's like to be in our shoes, because he was in my shoes a few years ago. He's the decathlon record holder at URI. He was an athlete here. He was an assistant coach here, and now he's the head coach. So he really understands what it's like to be in our shoes, both with the schoolwork, with practice and how tough it could be on you physically and mentally. So just having someone who is very understanding, but also so knowledgeable too, is such an advantage. There have been plenty of times when I was having some pretty bad weeks of practice, that he would just say to me like, "Hey, listen, like this is a 4 or 5 year career. You know, you're gonna have weeks that are not great," and he's like, "I've been there plenty of times," but just seeing what he did too, right? Like listening to him say that, like you're gonna have times where you feel like you can't do anything, you can't throw at all, you feel like you're brand new to the sport. But then to hear him say that and then see what he did in his athletic career does give you like a lot of confidence to say, you know what, like just got to keep showing up every day, put in the work, and just don't lose hope. Because eventually those bad weeks turn into good weeks turn into good months, and good months turn into good seasons, and so on and so forth. It's a huge advantage having someone of his caliber, I guess, as a coach for our team.
And so you've obviously got Coach Baltzell, if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yep.
He's the overall head coach, and then you've got Coach Carroll, who's an assistant coach, but specializes in throwing.
Yes, yeah.
Before we kind of go back on to Baltzell, because I have a question just about the individual philosophies with coaching the different sports. But Coach Carroll, having someone that's specifically focused on your aspect of track and field, how big of a boost is that too?
It's huge. It's like without him, you don't have throws. You can't really do it. It's like asking like a pitcher to go out and pitch without a pitching coach, right? Like you need someone who understands every like inch of that movement and how to explain it to you different ways, because every thrower is different. They understand different, like the same thing different ways. Like if I said to you something about your elbow, right, when you throw, keep your elbow up, you can say, okay, sweet, I'll keep my elbow up. But if he says the same thing to me, I might not like understand it as well. So someone who really, really understands the sport and can explain the same thing in many different ways is a huge, is paramount, really. Like without a throwing coach, you're really like there's really not a lot of hope for huge progress. Pretty much, it's extremely necessary.
And so then you talked about how Coach Baltzell was a decathlon champion as an athlete here at URI, but as the head coach for such a large team, one that covers so many different events, is he like competent with all of the sports that he's covering? Like, do you feel like that he is able to give you insight on throwing just as well as some throwing specific coaches?
Yeah, so that's a huge bonus to him being a decathlete. He's done it all, right? He's done the throws, the jumps, the sprints, the mid distance. So it's like someone having, like all the knowledge unlocked, right? Someone could be a magnificent sprints coach, but they have no idea how to throw, which is fine because they're a sprints coach. But for him, he knows he can bounce around the track, right? He'll go over to pole vault, say, hey, do this, right? He's talking to Mason, you gotta, I don't know, back up your run up a little bit or go down a pole. And then he'll walk over to long jump, say, okay, here you're missing your stride, you're a little bit off, and then he'll go over to sprints and help him out there, or come over to throws and help us out. He's like a jack of all trades, and I definitely, he's very, very knowledgeable. Now for Coach Carroll, that throws is his event, right? So he's obviously very, very like versed in that subject. So I'd definitely say Coach Carroll is, I guess, more knowledgeable on just the throws than Coach Baltzell, but just the fact that he can do everything, like coach everything, is so impressive and so useful too.
And so as we're sort of rounding out our time here, I want to just touch upon what you're looking forward to for this coming year. Obviously, you're a senior. Are you eligible to have an extended stay here at URI? Are you going to look into getting a master's? Or
yeah, so I actually I came into college without taking pre-calculus in high school, which is necessary for engineering. So not having taken that class, I was behind in math, which set me back about half a semester to graduate. But I was just going to take a couple summer classes and graduate on time. But my throwing coach, Coach Carroll, came up to me and said, listen, if you want to stretch out that 4.5 years to 5, like you could be here for a 5th year and still do. And so I'm not doing a master's. I'm just doing a normal engineering degree in 5 years, picking up a couple minors. But yeah, so I will be here next year for an extended stay. What was the other question? Sorry.
Well, just kind of like, now that kind of changes how I want to frame it, because I'm going into this, I'm thinking that, this will be your kind of like last dance in a sense, trying to go for the 4-peat for that 4 years. But I mean, now that you have the 2 more seasons, like as a team, you've won the conference championship. You have that sort of not honor, but you've got the winning experience. You've got that feeling. You've got a couple bits of individual winning experience as well. Do you have any particular goals that you wish to set out for over the next 2 years now?
Yeah. So one huge and kind of like shoot for the stars goal is this summer we're hosting the U.S. Olympic trials out in Oregon, and that would be like seriously a dream come true. I still have a ton of work to do, like a ton of work to do. But that would be huge. Like that's probably, I wouldn't say that's bigger than the A10s this year, because that's what we're all here for. But that's probably the second highest goal for this year, if possible. As of right now, I'm not qualified. I can't get there, but we still have a lot of time. And that's probably the big goal for this year. And then next year is to make it a 5-peat, is to win this year and win next year and go out on top. Actually, we have a banner in our track that is, I think, out of spaces now of all the years that we've won our outdoor championship. But we have, I think, 2 more spaces on the indoor championship banner. So my goal is to fill that up too and force our school to get a couple new banners. So yeah, that would be awesome.
Well, those are some serious goals. That Olympic trials thing, that would be incredible. I mean, do you have an idea of distance that you need to, like a benchmark distance you need to reach, or like how far off the pace would you say you are currently?
So I would have to be right around like 195 to probably 195 feet in discus. I'd have to throw. My PR from freshman year, so I had my PR is still in discus, is still from freshman year. So I had a great year freshman year. I had a really bad year sophomore year. And then I redshirted this past spring. So my junior year spring, I didn't compete outdoors. Is why I can come back next year for 5th year. But I threw 175 feet my freshman year. So, I mean, realistically, 20 feet is a lot, right? But I feel like I've made like substantial progress in just overall like technical ability, right, with my technique and physicality. I've gotten stronger, more knowledgeable. I'm still a ways off, but I think I can definitely. I think I could throw like, I don't know. I'm not a big. I never put limits on myself, but it's like you also don't want to just be like, oh yeah, I could do it. Right?
Yeah,
like, I could do it. You got to be realistic. It would take a magical season pretty much this year to do it, but I'm gonna give it everything I have. So yeah.
Well, that's great. I for one am going to be very interested in seeing how you're able to progress. Now that you've shared this on my show, I'm going to be watching you with a bit of an eagle eye to see how that goes. But Chris, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you have so much.
Taught me so much more about track and field. Now I just got to get either a sprinter or a distance guy to come on. Maybe someone maybe one of each from there, so I can cover all the other facets of track and field.
Yep.
But I mean, I for one know that the men's track and field team are growing exceptionally in popularity around here. I mean, just because you guys, you deserve it. You're so successful, and everyone's really starting to notice it now. And just like characters like yourselves being a part of that team just makes it all the much better. So thank you for joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And everybody back home, thank you for listening. Still going to line up a guest for next week. But yeah, as always, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you all in the next one.